Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to another live episode of Women Unleashed here on Grace Harris, author and transformational coach. I want to welcome you wherever you're hailing from the other side of the world. It'll be Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening for you, and it is Wednesday morning here in Australia. And today we are going to be tackling something really cool, which is the art of writing, using that as a healing tool, especially for people who are in recovery and who want to write, who's had the burning desire to express either through fiction or nonfiction. For a writer like me who's dreamed about writing a book since I was a 15-year-old young lady, this is like nirvana because being able to talk about where do I begin, which is one of the hardest things to do, and how do I continue is the second hardest thing to do. And how do I deal with my fears would be part of the obstacles that you would encounter. My guest today from Missouri, Michelle Melton Cox, is going to help us answer these questions. And we are also going to be talking to women out there and also gentlemen who have always wanted to perhaps explore their gift of writing as a means to not so much escape, but perhaps close a loop, come full circle, and really come out to a redemptive phase of their life. And we'll go deeper into that. So, having said that, I'm going to introduce my guest to you. And Michelle loves helping women in midlife and people in recovery tell their truths through fiction and nonfiction. She is an author, accelerator, certified book coach. Having undergone the rigorous training needed to become certified in fiction and nonfiction, she is also the creator of Addicts to Authors You Should Write a Book, Let's Find Your Story program, and the Fearless Midlife Writers Book Coaching. And they're all copyrighted frameworks. Very exciting. She has nearly 3 decades of experience as a professional writer, editor, journalist, and writing coach. She can be reached at bookcoachingworks.com or addictstoauthors.com. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome my beautiful guest. Michelle, you're with me. How are you this morning or this afternoon?
Very, very good. Thanks for the introduction.
That is my
I'm
pleasure.
doing
Thank
well.
you for spending the time with us. Michelle, share with us how have you become passionate and how have you come to create addictstoauthors.com and your programs?
Well, my program, Addicts to Authors, was born out of my desire to serve the recovery community of which I am a part. So I've been sober since October of 2004. And through the process of getting sober and staying sober, I've always been a writer. I've been a professional writer my entire life. But through the process of going through recovery and seeing how much writing was such a powerful tool for me and such a healing tool, when I launched my book coaching business, I really wanted to serve that community because so many people in the recovery community are told, you should write a book. I say all the time, we're strong people with brave stories, and those stories need to get out there. So that is how I came to create that program.
Wow. And so, when it comes to, so when you say recovery, I would just wanted to, I guess, for the purpose of our listeners, I guess to just educate them a little bit, recovery from, is it anything specific?
Well, so for me, it was alcoholism. Um, a lot of people will refer to recovery as recovery from drug addiction. There are plenty of other addictions, though, obviously, to go around, unfortunately. So people can be in recovery from a gambling addiction or a food addiction or drug addiction, alcohol. There's, like I said, there's a wide variety. And then there's the whole sobriety spectrum now, too. There's just an enormous community out there of people who have chosen a sober lifestyle, not necessarily because they had a problem with alcohol, or perhaps they suspected they were going to have a problem with alcohol, or they had a health condition. So there's that whole community of people as well.
Wow. That's amazing. It's great to know because having a choice and like for example, myself, we have what we call a dry house. My
Hmm.
partner and I choose to. It's a choice that we have because that's how we live. We don't drink, but it can get really lonely And so,
Hmm.
yeah, because you go out socially and you feel a little bit different. Um,
Right.
yeah, so it's great to know. So it's an
And
information that can be shared today.
right. And hopefully the pendulum is swinging a little bit on that front. But yeah, there are definitely times when it can be isolating, and especially for the people that have built their social life around alcohol or drugs. And then suddenly they have to separate themselves from that. So that also can be very lonely.
Yes, thank you for sharing because to be able to provide information where we can find these communities, and we will, Michelle and I will put some links perhaps in the comments below later on how you can start to reach out if this is a something that would be useful for you. But Michelle, before we go into the beautiful journey of writing as a way to re-experience being fully alive again, I wanted to
Hmm.
ask you, in relation to recovery, there is a big myth, and especially for me, it was a myth for me for a long time about the word addiction because I came from a family where there was quite a bit of it, addiction to different types of things. And there was a myth where a person is not necessarily addicted if you can't see it outwardly. But I found that to be personally incorrect because when I was doing my own healing, I did find that I had a form of addiction myself. It wasn't to any substance, but I had an addiction to anger. So that was what I had to heal. But then you couldn't see that because I had a very
Hmm.
successful life outwardly. So I wanted
Right.
to, because this is part of your expertise, how you help people. Exactly what is the definition of addiction in your own point of view?
Well, so first, let me say 100%, I am not an expert on addiction. I think that there are a lot of those people out there, and I'm not one of those people. So, what the medical definition is of addiction is probably not something I'm qualified to speak on, but I can definitely speak on the topic that addiction does not have to be seen. It doesn't, like, that's a big myth. A lot of people will think like, oh, there's no way that person is an alcoholic. She's a CEO at a company, or there's no way that woman is, using opioids and addicted to prescription drugs because she is, the PETO president and drives all the carpools. And, I think that that whole idea that there's a certain way that an addict looks and behaves, and if you don't fit that stigma, you must not have a problem, or that person, other people aren't realizing they have a problem. And the other idea is that if someone does maybe occasionally misbehave or do some things that might lead to, a few problems because of whatever their substance abuse is, but nothing really terrible has happened, so they haven't gotten a DUI, they haven't lost their job or their kids or gotten divorced, or all the things that people start to associate with there being a problem. And that idea that you have to hit this rock bottom in order for you to realize or to actually really truly be an addict, I don't think any of that is true. Plenty of people, myself included, are fully addicted to their substance and don't hit a rock bottom. And I praise God that I didn't. I mean, I remember when I was first in the program, and my sponsor said to me, "You have a high bottom, and you're very lucky." Um, that was like the first time I've been given language for it, because I didn't have a DUI or an arrest record, or I hadn't stolen from family members, and none of those things that happened. So that's what they call a high bottom. Um, but the flip side of that is that because of those myths that are out there, I think a lot of people like myself take longer to get into recovery because you're keeping it so hidden. So there's that whole hiding and shame, and I had a lot of those feelings that, like, I shouldn't have this problem because I've got a good home and a family. I mean, I have all these things. I shouldn't have this problem. So there was shame with, like, how do I even admit that I have it? Like, what sounds crazy in the thinking, but the addict's thinking is crazy. Like, what right do I have to have this problem? Right? That was sort of my thinking. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. So, I know myself when you talk about high bottom, I didn't have to hit rock bottom because I was the
Hmm.
same.
Hmm.
But what prompted me to go back into write, I didn't write for a long time. It was one of the
Hmm.
biggest signs that I was stepping away from who I truly am, from the core
Hmm.
of my soul, because I abandoned what really fed my soul, if you will.
Hmm.
And that was a big, big sign. And I noticed through my journey that I would go back to writing at that time when I would be, at a place where it's really, really dark, and you'd read
Hmm.
my writing and it's so powerful, and you'd be like, what's going on here? And so that's when I started to notice there is a gift somewhere where an expression need to be created, and it doesn't have to be created from a place where you are going spiraling down. It is actually, I
Hmm.
think this is actually the gift that you're cultivating, and you specialize in
Hmm.
helping women in midlife and also people in recovery. So I guess I wanted to ask you, how did you begin to, in your journey, how did you begin to tap into writing as part of your healing?
So the way I mean, I had always journaled, and I think I saw real value in journaling throughout most of my life because, even when you're a young person, and you may not, I mean, plenty of young people have a lot of problems, but my life was pretty blessed. But even as a young person, and I would journal, and there might be something that you would be really upset about, and a few months later, you could be writing about something else and flip back in your journal and look at it and go, huh, like that sort of resolved itself now, didn't it? Or, it would lose its sting and you would see. So it gives you great perspective. And I realized that as a young person. So I guess when I got into recovery, and I actually took a course at my church one time, and then I sort of started applying it to my writing. And I think it was this idea, and I talk about it with my folks in recovery, that one of the greatest things that writing does in recovery or sobriety or really midlife, anything, is it allows you to see the bounce in your life. So I talk about, like, there's this line, if you draw a line and all the good things that happen to you are above that line. In your life, all the good memories, all the positive things are up there, and all the kind of bad, painful things, the trauma, small traumas, big traumas, all the bad stuff is on the bottom. And when you write, you can see the bounce. You can see how the things on the bottom bounced you to the thing on the top, right? You can't normally see that just in your day to day. But if you're writing, you often can start to make those connections, and so you can see you can see the things that sort of gave you the wings to be where you are now. And you can also see how you might be able to affect some change in your life. So it's really helpful in a lot of ways. And I think it's helpful in fiction and nonfiction, because I always tell people, if you want to write about something, write about a time in your life, but you don't want to write nonfiction, you can fictionalize that. And here's the really cool part about fiction: you can change the ending. You can also change the beginning. Like, it gives you so much power over that story. And while it doesn't really apply to your life, just being able to change it in those ways sometimes feels really powerful for people.
Yes. I speak to a lot of people who want to write a book, and they want to write a book that's fictionalized, as you say. And in the fiction book, when you speak, these are mostly my friends, right?
Hmm.
And when you ask them about, okay, tell me about this fiction, and it really is very similar to what's currently going on or what has recently gone on in their lives, um, but in a fable type of story. And where they usually get stuck is, like you said, what's the ending? How does it
Hmm.
conclude? And it's great that you mentioned you can create whatever ending. You can even rewrite the beginning. Because I think for me it sounds very, like you said, powerful, but there is a high potential for catharsis, especially when you choose this is how it's going to end. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like,
Hmm.
this is what I want to happen in the end. Like,
Hmm.
I want this character to. And so, in your experience helping people with especially with the fictionalized nonfiction,
Hmm.
um, how is it for them to um, to write something that's the substance really comes from a lot of experience, and be able to have that ability to create how it pans out for them? What is the
Um,
effect
I,
person, the writer?
I think it's really powerful. So very often, a writer might not even recognize their story within their fiction. So that's always interesting to me. Um, So when they do, that moment when they do, and it often happens because a lot of my coaching is on Zoom. It often happens in a situation like this where I'll see something that is clearly they're dancing around, and I'll ask a question and they'll start crying. Like they'll just realize that moment when, they are writing their story, or they're writing a part of usually what they're writing, especially if they don't recognize it. The narrative, the plot doesn't follow their story at all, but the why does. The reason it matters does. So they're writing their pain, or they're writing their loss or whatever in a much different way. And when they make that connection, it's pretty powerful. But then that also gives them permission to change it if they want to, or not change it if they don't want to. The flip side of that is a lot of people will say, well, I want to write my story, but I'm going to write fiction because writing nonfiction is too vulnerable. Like I don't want to write it about me, so I'm going to write it fictionalized. And what they always discover is that writing fiction about their story is just as vulnerable. So I try to make sure that they understand that from the beginning, that it's going to be just as vulnerable whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction about your story.
Wow. What I'm hearing from that is it's not always the output for people to read and see, but it's the experience that you're going through as you're writing the story, whether you think it is nonfiction direct or fictionalized. So you're trying to put up this, I don't know, veil, if you will,
Hmm.
but the experience
Right.
is just as raw and vulnerable. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And I think for people in recovery, or people who made a choice for a sober lifestyle, writing about their experience or their choice or their journey through recovery, a lot of those people, what I know about this sober community is that they will give other people who are struggling the shirt off their back. Like they want to help other people get to that place, whether it's just a sober choice and struggling with making a sober lifestyle decision in a society that is so alcohol and leisure driven, or whether it is choosing to get well for yourself because you had a problem with a substance. Those people really want to help. And what they find is after they've been in that lifestyle or recovery for a while, they're not quite sure how to make sense of their past pain. Like they sort of start to have that feeling of like, is this what it's all about? Is this all it was for? Because there's that early excitement. Well, first there's that early hardship of getting sober, but then there's that early excitement of like, hey, I did this. And then after a while, it can maybe start to feel stale, or like, what's the point of all of this? And usually what will re-energize them is when they're given the chance to help someone else. So a lot of times what I tell them about the program is when people have been saying to you, you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a book, because other people wouldn't say that to you if there wasn't a piece of your story that they really connected with. And you can use your past pain to make a difference in the recovery community going forward.
Wow, powerful. There you go. Thank you for
Mm-hmm.
sharing because somehow I really relate to that. It's not like I've ever been
Mm-hmm.
in recovery from but I guess because like I've shared, I had to get myself out of addiction from anger, is that there comes a plateau, if you will. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the word stale when you think about, okay, so I've now come out, and then what?
Mm-hmm.
Find the meaning from
Right.
a very big thing that you've just overcome. And it can be done in many forms, like for example, many women like you and me, we coach, we help others, so that's really giving it meaning for what you've gone through.
Right.
Writing a book, because it's a useful thing,
Mm-hmm.
to do in your self-healing, just sitting there and reading. So I know myself, when I read memoirs or when I read self-help books, I could just sit there for hours and be lost in space
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
come out as a much better version of me. So Michelle, I guess the first question is, because you help women in midlife and those who are in recovery. If I was one of them now, and I've been really wanting to write this, I've been told so many times. But the number one thing is, how do I begin? Where do I begin? What would be your advice?
Well, so I have a program, actually a free webinar that I'm doing in May, but it's a how to take the next big step to make your sobriety more meaningful. And I walk people through a process of like, let's first find one story in your experience related to the topic that you're interested in writing about. And we're going to mine that. We're going to mine the story a little bit. So you might think of like one phrase for the story, like this, oh, I want to write about this one time when, whatever. And then I walk you through a process of how we're going to flesh that out a little bit more. We're going to find all the details about that made it meaningful, that made it pop into your head as the thing that you told me, that. And so we will go through that process and we'll really find the importance of that story. And then I'll show them, I walk them through another process on how to make that story bigger and larger. And then there would be a whole nother step of like working through the whys of writing that book or that topic. And there's a whole blueprint that I take people through at the next level. But initially it's just getting those stories out of your head. So mining those stories is the term that I use. But if people don't know what that means, it's, just figuring out what stories are important. And I have a whole process that I work with them to do that.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's like opening a suitcase and just unpacking the little bits and
Mhm.
pieces. Well, here's the underwear part, and here's the trousers and the shirts, and they go there. And this is the beauty of having a book coach for everyone who really wants to
Right.
start and don't know where to start. Because what it does is when you're trying to do it yourself, that fear is real. Where do I start? How do I start?
Hmm.
Even if you've been a lover of writing for a long time, because it's just too emotional, you see. But when
Hmm.
you work with someone, it becomes a fun process, and it's not
Hmm.
often it can be emotional, dramatic, but you're not alone. You're actually
Right.
like you're using a part of your brain where you are being taken away from that which gives you that emotion and triggers, and it gives you a purpose. Okay, story, what was that about? Why? Gets you thinking. I think
Right. That's what I think I just posted on Instagram today. It's a quote that I have on my website that like your story is like a jigsaw puzzle. But we have to dump it out and sort the pieces and put them together in the right way so that has meaning. So you have a story that has meaning that would impact someone else in a way that you can't even maybe know this side of heaven, but unless you write it in a meaningful way, which is what I'm good at helping people do, then it might not get out there. So I really love to help people like find those connections between the stories that they want to write, or if they're writing fiction, help them find the why, like what is the point they're trying to make with that story. And then once we get really clear on that, then all the other parts kind of come together. So it's that why and that key point that message that you're trying to get out there. And I wanted to say something else that you had mentioned earlier, like even if people just want to write their story just to be writing it, I think that the whole legacy part of this, you talked about how women, if they are empowered, can affect their communities, but I also think that they can affect their families. And there's a lot of times there's a lot of shame in people that have had a problem with addiction. They carry this shame around. I know, like I was hesitant to tell my own children when the time came, and but uh, I think Brene Brown said that like the antidote to shame is like vulnerability and connection with other people. And so I think, sharing your story and connecting with others who can say me too, which like she says are like the two most powerful words, that really helps. And it's so great for our kids and our families to see us do that, to own that and to write about it. And it doesn't even have to be addiction. I talk about women in midlife. I mean, everybody has a story, right? So whether you're writing about it through fiction or nonfiction, if you've got something to say, it's important to own your voice.
oh, preaching to the choir. Thank you for mentioning that. I couldn't say hallelujah, amen enough. It has been my personal experience. I'll quickly share it because this is important especially for those who are watching. We have a lot of coaches and healers and entrepreneurs following the Women
Mhm.
Unleashed series,
Oh,
and
good.
wanting to at a place that they're needing and wanting to write a book in their journey as an entrepreneur. So when I was a new entrepreneur and I was training in my speaking profession, uh, one of the people that I looked up to and role modeled from at the time said to me, "You have to start writing a book so that you can really establish your authority in your field." And I said, "Well, guess what? I am already writing a book." And when
Hmm.
they asked me, "Oh, great, what is it?" And when I said to them, "It's my memoir," because it is a story that was burning inside of me for a long, long time. I have been told, um, you are a nobody, and nobody cares about your story. No one wants to read your memoir. Do not write your memoir. Write a how-to framework book. Now, this advice cost me 6 months. Now, I'll jump to another friend of mine that another speaker. She was told the same advice from another mentor. Do not. She wanted to write a memoir, and she was advised, no, 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 no one cares. Go write a framework book. Now, obviously, this kind of advice is getting around from people, and this is what I'm going to say, this kind of advice comes from people who are not writing lovers. They obviously do not have a burning story that wants to come out and be expressed for their own truth and
Hmm.
nothing but the truth. And second, I have always been a writer. So if there is a story inside of you, follow that flame. Like, get that burning desire out of you. Don't even pay attention to any advice
Right.
that makes you feel suppressed. Because guess what
Right.
happened? When I wrote my memoir, it opened my life purpose, because it not only got to bestseller on my just by myself cracking the code, but more importantly, women started to come to me, and that's when I realized, hey, this might be my story, but really I don't own it, because it's just a variation of millions of other overcoming stories owned by women. We've got to come together, like what Michelle said, is that we've got to come together and have a voice. And this is
Hmm.
our voice, is we express our voice with the way that we want to express it, and how we can express it with who we are and what we're really capable of. And so
Right.
I just wanted to support that point that you said, because it's not being said enough. So thank
No,
you,
I
Michelle. Yeah.
no, I agree. I agree. And I think that it's important, a couple of points there. One, a lot of people will say, well, who's going to care about my story? Well, do you care about your story? Because if you care about it, you need to write it if you want to write it. And you can write it, or you can write a memoir. Now, I think a lot of people here have heard that advice: memoirs are hard to sell. Memoirs are hard to sell. Memoirs are hard to sell. Memoirs are hard to sell to traditional publishers, but memoirs are not impossible to sell. And your story obviously connected with people. Um, the other part of that is, like you said, it opened up your life. So was it like the end all of your career? No. But sometimes the story that is burning inside you, you have to write it before you can write the next story that is the one that might be your big bestseller, that might be easy to sell. And I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that are writing the book that they had to write, and they'll even say while they're doing it, this is the book I have to write. The book I'm going to write next is this. So if your memoir is the book you have to write it, because somebody is going to connect with it. You know, if you're writing it, write it for one person, pick that one person that you're writing it for, and it's going to connect with more than one person.
Yes. And also the legacy. That's just like the most
The
beautiful thing.
legacy is so important.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, is intergenerational transformation. Think about great great grandchildren who one day could say, "This is a woman like generations before me, who'd
Hmm.
actually come out and found her voice to say that this has to stop." And
Right.
you'll be way long gone before people
Right.
are going to acknowledge your work, but you did it. You did. It's not
Right.
about having that feeling of um, full belonging now,
Right.
because because when you initiate something, you've done something really big. Michelle, my other question is, this is for our listeners, especially the women in midlife, like yours
Hmm.
truly. So when you in the midst of writing, let's say for example, you know, a woman does a lot of journaling, and there are some random thoughts and ideas written somewhere, but they're not
Hmm.
compiled, and there's a burning story or idea that they want to share, and they have a this fear of, and it's very very common, this
Hmm.
fear of becoming, well, not so much ostracized, but isolated from their immediate circle because of an idea that they think could be too radical to express. How do we go around this obstacle, this internal obstacle?
So I think that, so you're thinking like, are you talking about like a controversial topic, or it's
Yeah,
an idea?
it could be controversial in a way that there are people who's gonna get really offended, or the topic itself might be too futuristic and radical. But either way, it's really that fear of I'm going to be alone. No one's going to,
Right.
yeah.
No, yeah. So I think a lot of people have the fear, like, who is she to write that? That's sort of that. What you're describing to me is maybe masking something that so many writers deal with, which is imposter syndrome. So you're telling yourself that everyone is going to think, oh, that idea is too radical, or that topic is too controversial, or whatever. But maybe what it is you're worried that they're thinking, who are you to write that topic? Or that's been done, or it shouldn't be done, or whatever. So I would really encourage someone to examine, like, let's work through like some of the other symptoms of imposter syndrome in case that's really what you're dealing with. And oftentimes that's how that comes out, right? If people a lot of times also worry about, like, can I write about things that have happened to me, that if it makes other people look bad, and I think Anne Lamott says, if you didn't want me to write bad things about you, you should have behaved better. So I mean, I think that's like a great line, but that's a whole nother topic. People have to be a little bit careful, but I think that fear sometimes, people have a fear of starting because of imposter syndrome. They have a fear of picking their topic because they don't think they're enough of an expert. They might have a fear of writing about a certain topic because they think it's too controversial, but really what it is their fear is that it's been written about too much, that they, what is their voice? And what I say all the time is, if you want to write about it, it hasn't been told by you. It hasn't been written about by you. It hasn't been discussed through your lens. So
Mm.
oftentimes I think that's what it looks like.
And you're exactly right about the imposter syndrome, because there are so many women, for example, or gentlemen, human beings in general, who want to write about time management, for example, and they think
Hmm.
about, oh, this is being like, who am I even to talk about this? I can't even manage my own
Hmm.
calendar, but they have this passion, they have
Hmm.
something to say about it. But it's what stops them is that, who am I to write it? Like, people
Hmm.
are just gonna like, yeah, whatever, me, when they
Hmm.
hear. And that's to do with who am I to write? It's the imposter syndrome. And
Right.
I think the question I want to pose to you, whether you agree or not, is that because I personally feel, like you said, written from through their own lens. And I feel what makes it powerful is that you have your own story behind that idea. And really, that's what
Hmm.
matters, is for people to
Right.
hear directly what's happened in your life, through your own
Right.
lens. Yeah.
Right. I always think, like, I kind of liken it to people, women are, we're particularly worried about this. We're so worried about, like, being pretty and being thin and being all those things. And I say this to my daughter all the time, like, um, name your best friend, and she'll name her friend. And I'm like, did you pick her because she was pretty? Did you pick her because she was fun? Like, why did you pick her? You picked her because of how she makes you feel, right? That's what you remember about people after they die. That's, it's how they made you feel. And so I think the same thing goes for experts on topics. We all want to read a book from the experts on time management or money management or whatever, but the people that we really relate to, and those books, even, what do we want from those books? We want them to share their testimonials of people that they helped that are like us, right? So the people that aren't perfect are the ones that we can relate to, the ones that we can that we're drawn to. We're not drawn to the ones that are perfect at the things that we want to do, but the ones that are maybe just a step ahead of where we were, because then it feels attainable, right? Like, I'm not going to get the financial security and wisdom that Dave Ramsey has, but I might be able to figure out how to, balance my finances a little better from an entrepreneur who's maybe 5 years into business longer than I am, you
Yes,
know?
absolutely. And with books, there's always like one little tiny thing that you remember about a book, and you some often find yourself, for me at least, find myself making either a small or a big decision, and I'd remember that, oh, this is because I read this, and based on that. So it's always that
Hmm.
little connection and in relation to, and often I
Hmm.
don't even remember who wrote it. Like, it's just that connection with something you're reading, and it's also about
Mhm.
connection, isn't it? Like I love how you said often, we remember people when they pass away for how they made us feel, and that is so true, and that's true in the negative side and the positive side.
Mhm.
Unfortunately,
Mhm. Right, right.
so yeah. So I guess I wanted to ask you finally, Michelle, when it comes to when people write nonfiction or fiction, especially those who are going through the recovery phase, what does it do when the book is done? What happens? Tell me, paint me a picture of what happens. How do they feel?
So I think that they feel so empowered because they did something really hard. Writing a full length book is not an easy task. It takes so many different skills. It takes learning. You have to be willing to learn. And then they feel powerful because they owned the story or their voice in a way that they had not done before, and in a way that is so permanent. I talk about that I believe in the power of story to create joy from hardship and euthanize isolation and make peace with time. And that's the one that a lot of times people ask me, like, what do you mean make peace with time? How does writing make peace with time? Like, well, time is passing, whether or not you like it. We're all getting older. Time is moving it feels like a record pace sometimes the older you get. But if you create something with your voice that is so permanent as the written word, it's that legacy thing, right? You did something with that time that's big, and now you can hold it in your hand. It's not just an idea in your head. You can share it with other people. So they feel very empowered and very accomplished and very tired.
Yes, good tired.
Good
That's
tired.
yes. It's a
Hmm.
beautiful kind of tired. And so what's the next thing that they do? What happens? How do people then when they work with you, for example, how can they reach other people with their work? How does that work out?
So the publication process, it looks different. I mean, there's so many options now, and it looks so different for everyone that would be probably an entire another conversation. Obviously, finishing the first draft of your manuscript is not the last step before publication. There's a whole lot of things that should happen next. If you're writing nonfiction, you have to start thinking about things like platform and um, just depending on what you want your book to do. So you asked, back to your previous question, how do people feel when they're done with their book? A lot of times they feel empowered to go do the next big thing in their career, right? Or in their life. But even if the book, prior to the book being published, and I have, clients that are examples that start speaking at conferences and doing different things. But if aside from the next steps of doing another draft of your book and making sure it's very clean, or writing a book proposal, if you're writing nonfiction, you may not have even had to finish the book. A book proposal, depending on your method of publication, would be the next big step. Getting copy editing, getting all of those things. But then there's the publication path, and writers have to make a decision as to how they want to go about doing that. Do they want to seek traditional publication, which is being represented by an agent and having agents, pitch your work to publishers, or do they want to go to small presses where they don't need an agent, they can go directly to the publisher, or do they want to go with a hybrid, or do they want to self-publish? So there's a lot of it depends to that answer.
Yeah, I guess the reason I asked that question is because I wanted to normalize that phase of releasing your book, because that can get really overwhelming for people who are initiating or birthing the idea of I want to write a book. They jump straight to the end process and go, oh, but how am I going to? It's too hard to get up. It's all like hearsay what you hear, and no, and a lot of us still think about the old traditional dinosaurial
Mm-hmm.
times when it takes years and years to get someone to take a look at your book. It's no longer true and correct. You now have several options on how to get your book out. You can also change the channels. You may start like this, and then you may want to amp it up later on. But it's really, I
Right.
guess, I wanted to normalize it in a way that is a really, it's not, it's just the end part of things. It's the
it's
experience that I would
it's a
probably recommend.
journey, right?
Yes.
It's a
Um,
journey. And that's one of the things I'll say to my clients, especially my clients that are going to self-publish. but really, even traditional publishing now, unless you're a really big author, you are going to have a big role in marketing your book. And I say it's a marathon, it is not a sprint. So even on publication day, you could still be doing marketing things and growing the audience for your book 5 years from now. If you write another book, that book will add to the note, to the sales on the first book. I mean, it's all of those things. So yeah, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And worrying about publication on the day you start, or even before you start writing, I kind of liken that to like if you're building a house and you're walking around fretting about who you're going to hire to cut your lawn. And you haven't even dug the foundation. Why are you worrying about who's going to cut the grass? So yeah, like
Yep.
get the book written and talk with the book coach along the way about how, what's going to look best, what are your best options, and somebody who can really walk you through that is a better method than worrying about publication early on.
Yes, yeah. Often too, it can be a form of us just looking for ways to sabotage our dreams.
It's yes. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, it's
so a book coach is not just about coaching on a book, but uh, being there for you as a human being, and so just opening up this world of you don't have to do this alone. Like we are all
right.
in this together, telling our
Mm-hmm.
stories. Thank you so much, Michelle. I have loved this conversation, but before I do
Me
let you
too.
go, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. I guess the
Sure.
first one would be, how do we connect with you? How can someone begin to work with you and contact you? But also, one last wisdom about when in the middle of um, writing a book and sharing the story, what's your tip on how to stay in that what I call a mojo, or in your flow? How do you stay in that flow?
In the middle of writing a book. So I think if you feel, well, one of the most important things I think, and I'm stealing this from someone else, and I can't think of the author's name, but she wrote 2,000 to 10,000 words. How to go from 2,000 to 10,000 words. I'm probably getting that wrong, but I want to give her as much credit as I can while I'm thinking about it. And she talks about in that book, don't do the hard work of writing while you're writing. So the hard work of writing is the whole, like, figuring out what this chapter is going to be about and figuring out what your point is and how to keep it along keep your narrative drive going. And don't do all that work while you're writing, because that steals the joy and the creativity. Do the hard work of writing with a book coach or ahead of time. Do some of that so that when you sit down to enjoy the creative flow, it's not interrupted with all of that stuff. So that's one of the keys to that, I think. And I hate it that I can't think of her name because that's not very nice. But the other piece of that is that if you're writing and something starts to feel stale, and I just had this conversation with a client yesterday, it's feeling stale and it's feeling like a chore and you're slogging through, leave that chapter or scene and go do the one you really can't wait to write. Just go do that one. Write that scene, so that you get the joy back, and then you'll be excited again and you can come back and slog through the one that was slowing you down. So
Beautiful, amazing. I love that. Thank you so much. So, how do we connect with you and just begin a conversation with you about writing a book?
sure. So probably the best place to go is bookcoachingworks.com. So bookcoachingworks.com is my website, or Addicts to Authors. You can find me either place. It's all connected. And if you sign up for my newsletter, which again, the forms are on there and it'll pop up, and probably aggravate you, but the form will pop up. Then you'll get notified about my free webinar that's coming up, where I walk people through that process to mind their stories and all the other things that I've got going on.
Sounds like so much fun. So don't forget, if you want to unpack a story and get into fun, so just go find the webinars for a pop up from either addictsToAuthors.com or bookcoachingworks.com. That's right. Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you so much. Well, everybody, we love you listening with us and talking with us. Have a beautiful day. Thank you, Michelle, and we'll see everyone again on Women Unleashed. We love you
Very
all.
good.
Thank
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.